January 2, 1895. Baltimore, American, Baltimore, Maryland. Hypnotist to be hung. Responsible for a murder committed by another. First conviction of the kind in the annals of criminal prosecution. The actual murderer acquitted by a Kansas jury. The jury believed him to be under the hypnotic influence of the man now sentenced to death. Views of medical men and lawyers on the remarkable case. Wellington, Kansas, January 1. Anderson Gray has been sentenced to death by Judge Burnett, according to the verdict of the jury, finding him guilty of murder in the first degree for the killing of Thomas Patton. Thomas MacDonald, while under the hypnotic influence of Gray, did the killing, but was discharged after trial. Gray is a well-to-do farmer. Patton had incurred his enmity, and Gray hypnotized MacDonald, a farmhand, and while the latter was in that condition, compelled him to commit the murder. Thus, for the first time in the history of Kansas jurisprudence, the theory of hypnotism has seriously entered into the trial of a case of murder. J. V. Beekman of Sumner County, who is a prominent candidate for Speaker of the Kansas House, and who was the attorney to introduce the hypnotic theory, relates the extremely interesting details of the case. On the 5th day of last May, at a place near Caldwell, Sumner County, Thomas MacDonald shot and killed Thomas Patton. MacDonald was the tenant of Anderson Gray, a wealthy farmer who was the neighbor of the murdered man. Gray was involved in a lawsuit in which Patton was a witness, and he had, it is alleged, a consuming desire to get the latter out of the way. It is claimed he involved young MacDonald and Patton in a quarrel by reporting to MacDonald that Patton was circulating scandalous reports about his wife. On the 5th day of May, the two men met and exchanged angry words. This was early in the morning, and Patton was to return that way at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At this point, Gray appeared in the affair and commenced to exercise, according to the theory of J. V. Beekman, his hypnotic influence. He assured MacDonald, according to the story, that Patton was a dangerous man, and that his only hope of life would be to kill him first. MacDonald and his wife both rebelled at the murderous thought, but Gray, who is a man of intense willpower, insisted. MacDonald had never fired a gun in his life, and Gray at once procured a rifle and commenced to give him instructions. At the first shots, he could not hit the mark at all, but under the mysterious spell of Gray, who was an expert shot, became able to hit the mark in the center at every shot in less than an hour's practice. Shortly before 2 o'clock, Gray conducted MacDonald to the spot in the woods where Patton must pass, and cut a crotch in which he might rest his gun. At the accepted hour, Patton came riding by, and an unerring bullet from MacDonald's rifle reached his heart. After a time, suspicion pointed to MacDonald and Gray as the murderers. They were arrested, as also was MacDonald's wife. After 3 weeks in jail, MacDonald broke down and confessed all, asserting that he could not bear to see his innocent wife in confinement, but as bearing on the hypnotic theory, it was shown on the trial that whenever MacDonald got anywhere close to Gray, he would deny the confession or the fact that he had made it. At the opening of the Sumner County District Court 3 weeks ago, Gray, the accessory and hypnotizer, was placed on trial first. He was quickly found guilty of murder in the first degree and has since been sentenced to be hanged. On Monday of last week, MacDonald was placed on trial. The case lasted the entire week and was intensely interesting because of the peculiar defense offered. Judge Beekman, for his client, freely admitted the crime and made no attempt to soften its atrocious details. He tried the case strictly on the theory that MacDonald was under the hypnotic influence of Gray and that he had no control over his own actions. The court, in its instructions, left no dividing line between a verdict of guilty and an acceptance of the theory of hypnotism. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty, and the remarkable spectacle was presented of a principal who was innocent and an accessory who was guilty. The sentence imposed upon Gray has attracted great attention there and in all the cities of Kansas, and local physicians are discussing the justness of the verdict. It is held by most members of the legal fraternity that a hypnotist has no power to influence a man to commit a crime which is repulsive to the one controlled. They hold that if a man shrinks from committing an offense against the law, any effort of the hypnotist to force him to do the act will result in his losing power over the subject. For this reason, they are inclined to believe that Gray should not have been convicted on the theory of hypnotic influence. They believe, too, that an appeal to the Supreme Court will result in a reversal of the verdict. It is, all things considered, the most remarkable case in the criminal annals of Kansas, and the final outcome will be watched with a good deal of interest. June 4, 1897. The St. Joseph Daily News, St. Joseph, Missouri. Gray in limbo again. Anderson Gray, the Sumner County murderer, who was pardoned from the penitentiary by Governor Morrill just an hour before he turned over the reins of government to Governor Leedy, is in custody again and stands a fair show of taking another trip to Leavenworth. This time, he is charged with buying witnesses in a land contest case in Oklahoma and is a federal prisoner at Guthrie. The crime for which he is now held was committed before he was arrested and convicted of murder. After his pardon by Governor Morrill, the old federal charge was dug up against him, and he was taken in by the territorial officers. October 23, 1901. Lawrence Daily World, Lawrence, Kansas. Wealth for ex-convict. Anderson Gray, after a somewhat tempestuous career, regains valuable land in Kansas. Anderson Gray, the alleged accessory in what was known as the hypnotic murder case in Sumner County 7 years ago, has won a suit that restores him 900 acres of improved land near Conway Springs, land that is now worth $30,000. While Gray was in the penitentiary serving a life sentence for the exercise of his alleged hypnotic influence to induce Tom McDonald to kill Tom Patton, the Equitable Security Company of Kansas City foreclosed a mortgage on the land for $10,000 without giving Gray notice of its action. Before Governor Morrill went out of office in 1897, he pardoned Gray, thus restoring him to his legal rights. He sued for possession of the land and $19,000 damages. The court restored him the land and gave him $1,800 damages, being an estimate of the rental value of the land since the suit was commenced.